Welcome along, and this is the top 10 of the worst units in the game, version 2. I did version 1 a few months ago, but we've had the brand new DLC come out with all the new Middle Eastern and Asian armies, so that's changed things up a bit. I'd like to say from the off, this isn't the absolute worst units as such. It's units that I think might need a little bit of work, might need some help. Maybe they're just not as effective as they once were. But, you know, this is a brand new DLC. The league's just about to start. We're not sure what's going to happen and how units are going to perform. So this is really just a kind of a guess, estimation, preview, and just some ideas I'm throwing around, really. It's quite funny as well that I'm starting the top 10 worst units in the game off with one of the best armies, the German Imperial. I think this is the 1155 army. Absolutely fantastic army. But this is actually brings up a good point that I also want to mention, that yes, in my list, I'm kind of looking at the units in isolation. I'm looking at them in isolation. I'm saying, is this a good unit? Is this value for money? You know, is it effective, etc., etc. But then, you know, if you start putting prices down of units, you know, then as an example, a list like this, the weak points it does have, suddenly, you know, it strengthens this kind of army even further, just because I'm saying, oh, this particular unit is maybe not so cost effective now. So, you know, you've got to be careful, and I'm just looking more in isolation and giving you my opinion, but actually it's quite a lot more complex than that when you look at the army lists as a whole. And saying all of that, I'm going to zoom straight in. You're going to probably be very surprised. I'm going to put the Knights in. My gosh, the Knights are at number 10 on my list. They were in my top 10 best units. They came in at 4. They're almost deleted, actually. I had to add another video. Somehow they didn't get into the video, but they were 4 for my list, and I added a video to the main video. They were 4th. Now, look, it's still great units, wonderful to look at, highly effective one-on-one. I mean, they're heavily armoured, superior quality, knightly lancers, tons of POA on impact, a great quality, heavily armoured, so much going for them. But with the new DLC and all these Middle Eastern armies with their swarms of horse archers, it's just going to be really tough. When you were fighting more European armies, armies that just had a couple of knights, sergeants, a couple of mounted crossbowmen, not even, not all armies had mounted crossbowmen. So it was just an easier world, wasn't it? An easier time for the knights. But now there's a few issues, really, because some of these armies, like this one, I have to take out 2. It's preset. And then if I'm playing an army with tons of bow, we've got more mixed bow now, infantry, the Paviciers, with all the crossbowmen, all the mounted bow, Turkmen Cav. It just goes on and on. It's just going to be tough if you've only got 2 knights backed up by a few sergeants. You know, these kind of armies, you don't get, what's the max? The max is, well, not including knights, because just, you can't, in my opinion anyway, when you start taking 5 or 6, it's just not worth it. You can really only take maybe 3 or 4, depending on your build. So really, you're talking about, I don't know, 6 to 8 cav, reasonably, you can expect to bring out with this kind of army against, you know, when I was doing my army analysis, looking at Georgian list, I think the Berber list, these kind of armies, They had about 9. I had 19 cav. I had about, the average was 10 to 13 infantry with these newer armies, and about 15 to 19 cav. So how are you going to face all of that cav? It doesn't take much to disrupt knights with bow. So you're going to have to play pretty defensively, try and use your infantry to protect your cav, and then just go in at the right moment. And so this is what I'm going to say, really. It's not like they're terrible units and I'm saying not to take them and so on. I'm saying that maybe for newer players, maybe for players new to the league, the digital league that we all play in practically, it's just going to be easy to waste these knights. When you haven't got so many, you've got so much mounted bow. I think for newer players, players new to multiplayer, how are you going to keep these guys alive and use them in the best way possible? You're going to have to be clever. You're going to have to be clever. Really protect them, keep them in reserve, use at the right time. And so for inexperienced players, I think it might well be a struggle. That's what I'm suggesting might happen in the league this season and in general on the multiplayer scene. It's going to be hard to use your knights effectively. That's not the case so much with European armies. You're playing against the Papal list, Norwegian list, English, Scots, etc., etc. Then you don't have to worry about all of the swarms of light horse archers and so on. But when you're going against these new armies, beware. At number 9, we are on the Welsh Spearmen, and there's a few units that I don't like in the Welsh list. Poor old Welsh. I lived in Wales for a few years as well, so I feel a bit guilty here. But let's start. The Welsh Spearmen, they look great. Price isn't so bad. Large unit, so you get the combat strength modifier. So that, in that sense, they're good. But they are medium foot. They are medium foot. And that just for the price, 50. Probably they should be a little bit cheaper, maybe around 48. I think these units need to come down in price because in the open against heavy foot, they're just not going to stand for so long. You need some lucky rolls, but then in the end, you're at a -1 on the modifiers for medium foot against heavy foot, so you're just at a disadvantage. And when you're paying so much, 50, they really don't represent good value for money. So I don't know, maybe they need some armor or something, quality better. Maybe they could become above average, or just a drop in price. At number 8 on my list, and still on my list, the Welsh Longbowmen. Now there's a few things to say about these units. They were on my original list. They're still on my list of worst units. We do have to say that there's been a few changes and the price has come down. They were 42. And now, with the latest patch, they're 39. So that makes them a lot more cost effective. But I think the question still remains, what do you get for your money? And are they really worth it? I mean, they're average on protected. I mean, what's the difference to your massed archers? You're paying 3 more over the massed archers. Are they that much better? I don't see it on the battlefield at the moment. I don't. In my original video, I mentioned that this area, the bowmen in the DLCs to come, the later Middle Ages period, you're going to see some changes, and maybe bowmen with stakes, some defensive capabilities, because at the moment they just, any infantry close to them, they've got absolutely no protection, no POA against infantry, so they just fall apart. So I think these kind of changes to come are really necessary to make them useful, because I don't think they're that useful at the moment. Even on this list, I think is at the north, you can only bring 5 anyway, but in terms of what they can do on the field and then what happens once they get into action, it's just they struggle. So I still think, even though the price has gone down, which is great, they still need a little bit of work, a little bit of love, a little bit of help, and maybe that is still yet to come. And perhaps if they do get a little bit more defensive capabilities, maybe better range or something, there's a few things you could do, really. Maybe then the price will go back up to 42. I mean, maybe 42 something with stakes and more range. Maybe that's the way to go. But let's see. But at the moment, even though they're not the worst of the worst, they're still on my list of worst units in the game. At number 7. Now, this is just me putting this unit in this list, and I'm saying that the standard wagon, it was actually number 1 on my original list, the worst units in the game, the first version. This was the worst unit in the game, and I think almost everyone agreed. It's changed a lot, so we're going to talk about that. It's still really a question mark around this unit. It's not that it's the absolute worst, or it's going to always stay on my top 10 list of worst units in the game, but let's see what happens. Let's just go through it. So originally, I think it was about 76 it cost. It was superior quality and armored, as far as I remember. And now it has dropped to average or above average quality and armored. So it's still armored, but the quality's dropped. I think it might also be a bit smaller as well. But some of the key points to consider is the price. I mean, now it's the price of 1 raw spearman and the medium foot. It's 54. So it's gone down a lot, about 22 points. I think it was about 76 or so. So now it's 54. Huge drop in price, which is great, because this kind of unit can't get flanked. It's hard to defeat one-on-one. You really have to really gang up on it, and then it just holds and holds and holds. So from a kind of defensive point of view, maybe I think someone I know, De Ruyter, he's playing a game right at the moment. Actually, a player bought 2 of these, and I made the comment that maybe on the flanks, kind of if you had 2 of these units, you had and you wanted to play defensively, because it can't get flanked, and you had another one over there, perhaps, maybe it could be effective. I don't know. Let's see what happens, but at least it makes it more usable at the price, 54. It's not too bad, is it? And for offensive-minded players, it's useless still, probably, because it can only move 1 square at a time. So you really need to hold back, let the enemy come onto you if you're going to use these things. I think maybe maybe a few of these units I'm talking about in this list of the worst units, I think they're going to probably, in later DLCs, they're going to be upgraded a little bit. And I think the developers have mentioned that this unit, we're going to see some of the war wagons with mounted bow of some kind. So maybe it'll go back up to 76, but then you're going to have some bow units, which will be great, and maybe cavalry. Maybe it'll be faster. We'll see. Let's see. But there are some ideas and plans for these kind of units, and I think that's great because it does bring something different to the game. I have to be completely honest. I've hated them up until now, but with the costs going down so much, then yeah, maybe there's a time and a place. Perhaps. The other point to make that a lot of players don't know yet is that one of the new features of this unit is the +1 for cohesion checks for units around it and adjacent to it. I think it's probably a +1 for all adjacent units for cohesion checks. So that is great. It improves morale of units close by. So that's a great plus. It can really help you and your units that are close to it. So okay, it's at number 7. It's more of a question mark, really. Let's see how it plays, and maybe at some point it will come off the list. Number six on my list, the Abid AlShura. I think that's perfect pronunciation because I actually lived in the Middle East for a few years. Now this is, I mean, they're actually quite high on my list, aren't they, at number 6? But this is really just looking at the units in the game and how they perform, what you get for your money. But when you look at a list like this, they actually could be really useful. So I'm not saying that they're the worst unit, but there's a few issues that we'll talk about. Firstly is price. They're 39, so up against the Muslim spear, that's 3 more, and yet they're often at a disadvantage against spearmen because they are swordsmen, essentially. So on impact, they're about level. It's 100 POA each. If you're up against your standard defensive spear, Muslim spear, that's fine. But then they drop to 50 POA because they're swordsmen. So they're at quite a disadvantage once in melee against your standard spear, and yet they cost more. So this is why they're on this list. But having said all of that, there are a few mitigating things that you can consider. And first one is that as opposed to the defensive spear, which lose all their POA advantage when they try and attack, these units don't. So that can be really good because that just means you can be aggressive, especially if you want to play aggressively. You really need these units because all of this defensive spear and the raw spear is also defensive spear. They're just not going to be able to attack, or if they do, you're taking a chance because you lose all your POA advantage for being spearmen when you attack on impact. So at least with these units, you are at least evens against most defensive spear, or all defensive spear, apart from armored versions and so on. Although even on impact, it would be even. So they do serve a purpose. They probably, maybe in light of all of that, they don't deserve to be on my worst units list. But once impact goes down, they're just at quite a disadvantage against spearmen. So this is what you've got to factor in to your considerations. Maybe they could be a little bit cheaper. I don't know, maybe with them being able to attack, you need to pay more. So maybe it balances out. In the bigger picture, maybe it does balance out, because with defensive spear, you're just taking advantage of playing on the defensive and receiving impact, whereas at least with these units you can go on the offensive. So yeah, they do serve a purpose. At number five on my list, this will probably surprise quite a few of you. I'm going to go for the Guard, the Varangian Guard, and this one has the axe. Now, okay, it's a great unit, highly superior, well armored, well, if not the best infantry unit in the game. One-on-one, it's going to defeat almost anything, but you got to factor in, I think, the price. It's just so pricey. I'm not going to quite say overpriced because of its performance, but 87. Also the axe, you know, if you've followed me and seen some of my other videos, I've mentioned before that the axe version is better in my view, because it's just more well balanced. It does better against cav, got the 100 POA for spearmen, does better against swordsmen, whereas the axe, the heavy weapon, is just more specialized. It's for fighting armored units, so it can still be extremely effective against armored units, but in general I would always try and get the spear version. So that's maybe another reason why I'm allowed to put this at number 5 on my worst units. Yeah, it's just very, very pricey. And the other thing I was thinking about is when you consider it, this is a 24 turn game. It can often take quite a while to get into action, 6 turns or so. Then once you get going, it could take 4 or 5 turns before you defeat what's in front of you. So, you know, easily over half the game could have gone already, and this unit might have just defeated whatever was in front of it. And then it's got to turn around, you know, if it's somewhere over here and, you know, the main fighting is over here, then that's going to take a few turns. So what I'm really saying is, you know, the way the game's set up, the turns you have, the limited amount of time you have to get that win, in the end, this unit might not have done so much fighting. It might have just defeated one unit. If you're lucky, maybe it would get into combat with another, and then the game could be over one way or another. So when you look at the price at 87, you know, I'm happier really buying even the more expensive dismounted knights, 78. That's 9 less, and then the early dismounted knights are 69. You know, a lot cheaper. So 87, when all things are considered, that is a lot. Not to say that I wouldn't take them. You know, sometimes I do. Forget the chance, the way the points are. Sometimes you know, I've even on this kind of setup, I've almost maxed defensive spear. Pavicia's is maxed. You know, so the way it's all worked out, I might well be happy to take the Guard, and they might do a great job. You know, because you never know as well. I mean, if they rout a unit, that could send off or start a chain reaction route on the enemy lines. So they can be extremely effective. But just the price, that's a lot. I'm not arguing that they should be maybe cheaper. Maybe they will be in time, but yeah, they, in terms of value for money, I don't I don't think they provide value for money. I mean, how many raw spear can you get? and maybe if you could have, probably with some medium foot, you could have about 4 units for the price of this if you got the cheaper end ones. But there we are. They are at number 5. At number 4 on my list are the Armoured Offensive Spearmen. Armoured Offensive Spearmen, they cost 48. Bit of a waste of money. You don't get much over your Defensive Spearmen. It's just that they can still retain their POA advantage when attacking. But other than that, they're the same as Defensive Spear, but you're paying 6 more. So, and the way armor is in the game, you don't get a lot of extra POA for armor. On impact, you don't really count POA. So for the armor advantage, so they are really quite expensive. You go all the way back down to Defensive Spear at 34. There's 12 difference. It's just not very cost effective. But in saying that, going back to what I said about the knights, this kind of army, maybe it works out because you've got your more cost effective units. You've got your wonderful dismounted knights, even though they're on my list of worst units, in their own right, at the right time, they can be extremely effective. So, and you've also got some other great units like the Low Country Spearmen, the large Spearmen units. So maybe that's okay for this kind of list, but in isolation, looking at them in terms of what they offer compared to other spear units, they are just overpriced at 48. At number 3 on my list, the wonderfully named Cavalry. Gosh. This unit, above average protected. I just think for the price, 39, don't get Air Lance, so you don't get that POA, that extra POA on impact. That just makes this kind of unit not really value for money. There's so many light lancers on the field now, medium lancers, Muslim lancers, I think around the same price. Yeah, they're 39. Byzantine lancers 41, which are above average armored lancers. This kind of cavalry just doesn't compete with those kind of units. And you've also got, I think there's a noble cav with spear at 44. I mean, again, I don't think that's a good price. So these units, more expensive units with spear, I just think they are not great value for money. There is the cheaper version. I think some of the Muslim lists have them. I think it might be Muslim Cav, but they're cheaper. They're about 34. So you're saving 5, and they might be average protected. I think the qualities are not quite as good, but that's more of an argument for bringing them along if you're paying around 34. But once you get to 39, once you get to 44 for the Noble Cav, I just think that is expensive for what they can do. Okay, as I always say, you've got to look at the list in general as well. And okay, you've got some great knights. You've also got this Teutonic Order. You've got the better quality knights. So used in conjunction with your knights, they can be extremely effective, and maybe then they're worth bringing along just to bulk out your cav. If you want 6, because you don't have any sergeants. So this is what you have. And in that sense, they're maybe worth bringing. But just in terms of what they can do, what they bring to battlefield, they're not that great a cav unit. At number two, we come back to the poor old Welsh. God, they've got some poor units. The light longbowmen. Oh my gosh, they were on my original list. They're still on my list. I think they've gone up to second now on my list. I mean, I think I was expecting a few changes. I've already talked about the Welsh longbowmen. Okay, so price is better now. That's great. So 39, not so bad. But these light longbowmen, they're still, would you believe it, 36. 36. That's the cost of, your standard defensive spear. Dailami. 36 massed archers, 36 for skirmishers, and you've got the cheaper end skirmishers right next to them here. I've got the javelin men, 24, so that's 12 difference. What do you get for your money? 12 more. I don't think you get much. So these units definitely need to come down in price. I said it before, I said around 34. But maybe even 32. I mean, a lot of units have armor now. There's a lot of mounted bow around and stuff. So they're just not going to be effective at the price. They definitely need either more men, bigger unit, more effective firing, or just a drop in price. There's no way that they're worth 36. So they are now second on my list. Unfortunately, I think there's very, very few armies that actually have access to these guys. I think it's probably only the Welsh lists. So there they are. They are at number 2. Drum roll, please. We are going to do the number 1. Officially, according to me, at this stage, version 2 of my list, brand new DLC out, looked at all the units, I've come to my decision, the worst unit in the game, these awful Indian close fighters. Absolute garbage. Oh, their shields look good though, don't they? Absolute garbage, in my professional opinion. Oh dear. I didn't realise that the shields look so great. Anyway, so that's a bonus. Let's have a look. 36. Overpriced. They're medium foot. Unlike the Dailami, they're not impact. Unlike your Spearmen, they don't get their 100 POA from being spear. They're just medium foot, so a disadvantage against heavy foot as well. What do they do? What can they do? I mean, all right, they're medium foot, so maybe medium foot you can use the rough ground, but then you've got irregular foot at 6 less that can do the job. And when you look at it, the Indian close fighters are average protected medium foot, and these guys, your standard irregular foot, are average lightly protected. And protection and armor doesn't really give you much more on the POA. So absolute garbage. I really don't know or have anything positive to say about them. They just seem to fall apart when I've used them. as I say, they're not proper spearmen. They're only medium foot. They cost 36. It's just, I mean, okay, in this army, as I keep saying, with looking at these units, yes, okay, they might have a role. Though what role? I mean, you've got so much. You've got so much irregular foot. I mean, you may as well just save 12, and you know, I could add. I did that. Got rid of them. I've got 12, and then, you know, I've got 12 extra to play with. I mean, I could just get rid of them completely. I've got ton. Often, you know, the argument might be, oh, you don't have a lot of medium foot. Maybe they've got a role to play, but when that's not the case with this army. You know, well, I've got so much irregular foot, so there's no need to take them. Really, no need. And then I could just upgrade something else. If I maxed maybe some light horse or something. Oh, there's Turkmen. You know, I could maybe take out light horse. They're perfect. There you go. Turkmen Cav is great. So they just have no role to play. Irregular foot. It actually is better, really, because, as I've mentioned, their irregular foot came in on my list of best units. They came in at 10, and one of the reasons why was because I said with the light spear they do really well against cavalry. So not only are they medium foot and very versatile and maneuverable compared to heavy foot, so, you know, in ancients you've got a lot more units that are more maneuverable, but you don't get that so much in medieval. So these kind of units can be crucial because they're maneuverable and useful on the flanks. But then if they're light spear as well, on the flanks you've usually got quite a lot of cavalry, so they do great against cav because of their light spear. But you just can't say the same. Well, it says light spear. Okay, it says light spear and swordsman. So maybe, all right, maybe not completely, completely terrible, but 6 more. You're just not, you're not getting much value for money. And I think deservedly they are going to be the worst unit in the game at the moment. Let's see what happens in the future.